Welcome back to Science Genies. In today's episode, this will be part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Mindy Patterson from Renutrin. She is going to be delving deeper into our metabolic health, resistant starch, and some everyday choices that you can make right now, like what kind of olive oil should I get at the grocery store? Or what should I choose at my favorite fast food restaurant to eat? That can change how your body feels and functions. You're going to hear about Dr. Mindy's fascinating pilot study on resistant starch. And maybe resistant starch could almost be like a natural Ozempic. Who knows? Let's get into that episode and see what we find out. How would you define metabolic health?
I define metabolic health as someone who has appropriate lab values that are within range. And the lab values that I'm talking about, and not just lab values, I'm going to add some other things in a second, but let's start with we want our blood sugar to be in check. We want the fasting blood sugar to be less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. We don't want it to peak really high after we eat a meal. So we want our blood sugar fluctuations to be kind of like a wave, a small wave, not a tidal wave where we're getting those huge peaks and valleys. So controlling blood sugar is number one. Controlling cholesterol is number two. So we really want low LDL cholesterol, lipoprotein, low density lipoproteins to be low. And then we want our HDL, high density lipoproteins, to be high. And so when those become dysregulated, then we tend to have a little bit of metabolic dysfunction. Some of the other parameters we would look at would be blood pressure. We want that to be in check. We want our body weight to be in check, and not just body weight or BMI, but we want more lean tissue compared to fat tissue. And talking about fat tissue, we want to try and steer clear of that abdominal fat, that visceral fat that can also lead to poor metabolic health.
Yeah, I've always said that to my friends trying to lose weight that you should focus more on the body fat percentage than the actual weight on the scale, because that's what's really determining the health factors. But I know that belly fat tends to be the more difficult fat to lose. So, in terms of our microbiome and these probiotics that we're using to feed off of it, what would you say would be the most beneficial for us dietary wise to, I don't want to say 100% get rid of that belly fat as a no, but to aid the lowering of that belly fat?
I would start with getting probiotics and prebiotics through the food. And you can also get some of these benefits through fermentable foods. So, like your kefir or kefir, I'm not sure how exactly you say it, but
Kefir?
kefir,
Yeah, kefir.
yes,
Yeah.
that's it. So, kefir, that is a great way to get probiotics. And now they're adding prebiotics to those formulas, at least one company that I know of. You can also hit like sauerkraut and kimchi. Some of those things are really good as well. So I would recommend higher protein, cutting out those extra sugars as well, because those are not going to be satiating at all. And then getting those healthy fats from olive oil, healthy fish, um, nuts and seeds, things like that.
Is there a specific type of olive oil that you would say would be better for the microbiome?
I would recommend extra virgin olive oil. And there's a couple of reasons. It tends to have a higher polyphenol content, which our gut microbes love. They also can feed off of the polyphenols. And another reason is it actually has a pretty high melting temperature, or not melting temperature, heating temperature. That's not the right term. Basically, you can heat it at a high temperature and it won't become rancid. So you can usually, well, not too high of a temperature, but at a medium type of temperature, enough to kind of cook some type of food like a vegetable or even some chicken or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still retain all of those bioactive properties. If you heat it too high, then you're going to make that extra virgin olive oil become rancid. But EVOO tends to be more sustainable at higher temperatures and doesn't break down compared to the other types of olive oils or other just normal oils like canola oil and things like that.
What would you say is the most fascinating thing that you've learned in your research so far?
Oh. What I've learned, and this is the first, we have not published this because it's a pilot study, but what I've learned is by providing a high resistant starch diet, and this was a very purposeful feeding study. So we took adults that had prediabetes and we gave them a high resistant starch diet. So I came up with these recipes and we cooked them in the research lab, these foods, and we gave them breakfast, lunch, a snack, and dinner. And on average, we gave them a week's supply of food, and they were getting about 30 grams of resistant starch per day, which we see in the literature as having health benefits, but they all use a supplement because it's very challenging to get a lot of resistant starch in your diet. But what we found is weight loss wasn't even something that we were interested in. But every single person, woman or man in that study, lost weight in a week. And they all said they were just too full because resistant starch really promoted satiety, that they often didn't even eat the whole entire
Yeah.
meal.
Wow.
And so I thought that was very interesting. We did see reductions in blood sugar, but more so in insulin. And so that was kind of interesting to see. And we saw decreases in another peptide that's involved in glucose regulation.
Did you ever look at how this impacted people that were not pre-diabetic?
I have done a study in healthy females, and we did see similar. We actually gave them potatoes. It was just an acute type of feeding study. And so we did see that in healthy females, but we found after we did all of the blood analysis that they did have high insulin. So they likely were leading toward prediabetes. But, when we recruited them, we thought they were all healthy and they tended to, their record was said that they were healthy. So but we didn't see the weight change because it was just an acute feeding study.
Mm-hmm. And how many people were in the previous pilot study?
I believe we had 12.
Okay. So,
Yeah, so it's a small study.
yeah, would you scale that up?
I would love to scale that up, but to do a feeding study takes a lot of manpower. I think I had 4 students, including myself, on that study. We were cooking, we were delivering, we were recruiting, we were,
Yeah.
doing blood collection, blood analysis. So it was a big feat and just to coordinate. And I would love to do a longer study too. But one of the caveats with just nutrition studies in general is people get tired of eating the same thing. So even if we provide all the food for them, they're going to be compliant maybe the first week, but by the second week, they're going to be so tired of eating kind of the same routine of foods that compliance tends to go down quite a bit.
Have you done any research in any other diseases?
We currently have a study that's a pilot study again. We're looking at the impact of resistant starch on blood sugar outcomes in females with PCOS. Because females with polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, tend to have insulin resistance. And we know just from the literature that resistant starch not only helps with blood sugar, but also insulin resistance. So that's kind of an ongoing project that we have now.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that are suffering from PCOS. And have you ever heard of the glucose goddess?
I have.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of her. She was on another podcast talking about how she was able to help people revert their PCOS by some of her simple diet hacks. And I think that's the part about it, is that you have to make it seem easy, because if you tell someone that they're going to be eating chicken breast for the rest of their life with some broccoli, no one's going to be like, oh my goodness, this is what I'm going to sign up for. You have to make it more creative.
Right.
Yeah. But
Well, and I was having a conversation with my colleague just yesterday, and he is wanting to do a dietary intervention, but more kind of a Mediterranean type of Mediterranean in a certain population. And I said, "Are you going to feed them all their meals?" And he said, "No way. I'm going to tell them to eat an avocado twice a week, to eat a handful of nuts every day, and to use olive oil only, extra virgin olive oil only. Those are the three things that I'm going to tell them to do." Because it's almost impossible with people how they live now, and with the convenience of fast food and pickup food and takeout. It's just very challenging to do feeding studies.
yeah, are you still a practicing dietitian?
I will occasionally,
Occasionally.
but my main job is the professor position, so teaching and research, and then also the business.
So if I were going to eat an extremely low fiber diet, like what would that diet look like?
A lot of processed foods, pretty much all processed foods, white bread, um, some of the cereals that don't have any fiber, like, I don't want to call any of these out, but the rice puffs, rice crispy types are very low in fiber.
Hmm.
A lot of just snack food, a lot of crackers, and eat things like cheese, and your dairy products don't have any fiber in it. And none of your meats have fiber either. So you'd be eating meat and cheese and junk food all day.
Isn't that like the keto diet?
No.
Um, it- that's quite interesting. So if I had a very high fiber diet, what would that look like?
Lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, at least 5, 6, 7 servings of fruits and vegetables each day. You would eat whole grains like your brown rice, your oats, your quinoa, barley, and then beans, legumes, peas that we've talked about so much in this podcast are a great source of fiber and also protein. So I think those would be your main drivers, protein or fiber.
So if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm thinking, I want to increase the fiber in my diet right now, and I've been eating all of these things, but I'm still having issues with constipation, what would you then recommend?
Water.
Water?
I would actually recommend fluid intake, because if you're not getting enough fluid intake, then you're going to become constipated. So that's dehydration is one of the number one causes of constipation. I would also look at, maybe adding a probiotic at this point. If you're eating high fiber, try a probiotic and see if that helps with the constipation, but definitely water, electrolytes would be the first recommendation.
Have you ever done any studies on people suffering from IBD?
No, I hope to one day. That's one thing with resistant starch and my supplement. is that it is FODMAP friendly. So FODMAP is a long acronym that is really long. So FODMAP is when we cut out some of those sugar alcohols and those sugars that are found in either single or two saccharides, so they're very short carbohydrates, more simple carbohydrates. And so we want to cut some of those foods that are high in those out, and that tends to help with IBS symptoms. But you can get a certification, and actually my supplement, I had to send it to Australia for a certification to make sure it was FODMAP friendly. So that means with resistant starch, it is a complex type of granule, so it's slowly broken down by the gut microbes. So it tends to be well tolerated. Whereas, I gave my example of fiber one. Back then, it contained something called chicory root, which contains inulin, which is a very short type of fiber, and so the microbes just love to come and chop it up, and that process causes a lot of gas and bloating and discomfort. So
So, is there anything that can counteract the behavior of how fiber acts in our stomach when it's digested?
if you're looking at, there are some over-the-counter supplements like Beano, for example, that helps break down some of that, the compounds that promote gas. You can also, when you cook if you're using dry beans, if you soak them and then remove the water that you soak them in, that's going to get rid of some of the other gas promoting compounds to help them be a little bit more well tolerated. But I want to say too, is gradual intake of fiber foods are going to promote tolerability. So don't just go eat your 2 bowls of the fiber cereal in one setting. Gradually add it to your diet over time, over 2-3 weeks, even a month, and get your body used to it, and see how you feel after that.
So, it's possible to have too much fiber,
It is.
and that would lead to
I would say over 65 grams or more, which that's a lot of fiber. Again, you'd have to be very purposeful almost to get that much fiber in your diet.
Mhm.
But that can lead to some imbalances in some of your mineral absorption. So we're talking about some digestive issues that might occur at that point. It also would replace some of the other healthy nutrients that we would get that are found in carbohydrates and proteins and fats. So if you're eating high fiber, you're probably eating either low fat diet or low protein diet. So we just want to make sure we're getting adequate amounts of all nutrients.
Could you explain how fiber helps level out our blood sugar?
Sure. So if we're talking about the gel forming fibers, so those gels help entrap the blood sugar and can help remove it from the body. But then if we talk about our fermentable fibers, well, the gut microbes release, when they feed off of the fiber, they release compounds that can increase things like GLP-1, which we've all heard about GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1. And what it does is it helps regulate our blood sugar by acting upon the pancreas. It helps promote satiety, and it also helps with some energy balance within our brain. So there's receptors all over our body for GLP-1, including the brain, that help regulate our satiety, feelings of fullness, and regulate our blood sugar. There are other hormones or peptides that are released from the gut with these metabolites, they actually bind to the cells, and that causes the release of these really cool compounds that do pretty cool things. And one promotes satiety, another is helping regulate blood sugar, again, at the pancreas. So, you get kind of a wide, varied effect when you consume these fibers in regards to it can happen in the small intestine or the large intestine, again, depending on the type of fiber.
Interesting. Could you talk a little bit more about the small and large intestine and what's the difference between those?
Sure. So we think about our mouth all the way to our rectum, it's literally like a tube. So, and it's like this tube going through our bodies, even though it's not visible, but it comes in contact with our food, our water, our environment, everything that we do in our daily lives. So we have the mouth, the esophagus, and then we enter the stomach. And the stomach is what kind of breaks down some of our foods, but the small intestine is where we start to really see digestion occur. So the small intestine is very, very long, and that's where our digestive enzymes are located. And I would say 90-95% of digestion is going to occur in the small intestine. And we also get absorption in our small intestine. So we break down those nutrients and then we absorb those nutrients that go to different tissues or the blood. It just kind of depends on the nutrient. And then we have the large intestine, where we have a large population of our gut microbes that include not only bacteria, but viruses and fungi and all different types of living organisms. And those also tend to break down our food, but then they break them down in such a way that the products are not necessarily products of digestion that we would see in the small intestine.
Hmm. So your product is a prebiotic currently that you have out right now. What is your goal with this product on the market?
I want to help and empower people to take ownership of their health, because I'm so tired of individuals going to the doctor and they just get a pill. Let's just get a pill, we'll fix that. And then the person has agency on the physician and the pill instead of taking agency on themselves. And it just seems like, oh, I can take this pill, now I can do whatever I want. And that's really detrimental to our health, especially here in the United States, because we're not seeing obesity levels decrease. They're still rising. And we still have cancer, heart disease, you name it, it's still here. It's not going away. So pill pushing isn't my focus. I want to use diet and supplements to help people manage their blood sugar, manage their gut health, manage their overall health. So let's take a step back and look at diet, nutrition, exercise, those lifestyle factors.
Yeah.
Once you become healthier as an individual, your mind becomes healthier. You become a better person. So it just seems like it's a downstream win-win when you start changing your habits to, take ownership of your health.
And what would you say is the biggest difference between your prebiotic and other prebiotics on the market right now?
So my prebiotic also has another ingredient. There's only two ingredients, the prebiotic resistant starch, and then the other one is a mulberry leaf extract that actually partially binds to the enzyme in the small intestine that breaks down starch. So we get about a 20 to 30% reduction in blood sugar after meals with the white mulberry leaf. And then we get the added effect of the gut microbe impact with the resistant starch. So increasing our beneficial microbes, increasing that GLP-1 and some of those other peptides that help regulate satiety and blood sugar. So well tolerated, like I said, it's slowly fermented in the large intestine. And a lot of these other prebiotics are either going to contain inulin, fructooligosaccharides, FOS, or galacto-oligosaccharide, GOS. Those are all very short fibers, and so they're going to be broken down very, very quickly by the microbiome and cause a lot of perhaps GI distress.
So GI distress meaning like gas, bloating, discomfort. But it doesn't really. I personally have taken prebiotics and probiotics, and I'm someone who's had stomach issues, and I've found that I haven't found one that works for me yet. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And it takes time, like I said, it's starting slow. And I just started a probiotic too, and I have a very healthy diet, or at least I think I do. I hope so. I'm a dietitian, and I do exercise and try and keep, live a healthy lifestyle. But I thought, you know what, I'll just try a probiotic and see, and it takes a while, to overcome kind of the GI distress that can happen. It's just your body getting used to something.
Yeah, even if you're taking a medication, it takes about 2 weeks for it to normally kick in and work. But I think, I don't know on your side, but I see a lot of people suffering from digestive issues these days. And I'm not sure if it's just because we're all super stimulated with stress on our phones, or if it's the fact that the food that we're eating is so different. What is your opinion?
I think it's a combination.
Of both.
Stress, number one, is going to impact digestive health. And we know that people that have IBS, anytime they're stressed out, they're going to have a flare up. And so there is a direct correlation with that. And then, we also see that our food supply is just really poor in vitamins, minerals, and bioactives. So, if we can go back to farmers market type of living, that would be amazing. But we have so much processed food in our food supply and so much fast food, just low fiber, low vegetable, low fruit.
So some may say that the reason why a lot of people are eating these fast foods is because, okay, I'm a working mother, a working dad, and I just don't have time to cook. So what would you say would be the better option if I were to go to a fast food restaurant right now, because I didn't have time to cook, but I have like 3 children to feed. So I don't know. Do you have Chick-fil-A in Texas?
We do.
Okay. Let's go to Chick-fil-A right now.
I would recommend the grilled chicken sandwich they usually have a side fruit, or they used to have this kale salad. I don't know if it's still on the market, but I would recommend that. And then, a tea or water, something like that. I do think everything in moderation. So if you want to splurge on Chick-fil-A once a week, go for it. That's totally fine. And that's totally healthy. But, if you're busy and that's all you have, then I would definitely do that. They also have salads at Chick-fil-A that you could consume. But one thing about busy moms and dads, and I do this, I try to on either a Saturday or Sunday, is I pre-pack my meals. So I'll cook them and then pack them into serving sizes. So that way, all I have to do is just grab and go for lunch. And then I try to do really easy, simple dinners that 30 minutes or less, but they're healthy. And if that involves throwing in some broccoli or cauliflower, something like that, I chop up the broccoli and cauliflower that Saturday or Sunday when I'm meal prepping. So I just throw it in and it's done.
That could also be a fun activity. And you could also get the children involved with it, get everybody to cook and prep up the meals for the week, makes it easier. It'll be like a fun game in a way.
Yeah. And then they learn a little bit too.
Yeah, yeah, you're creating a new habit of taking care of yourself.
Right.
Yeah. So grocery prices are very expensive.
Huh.
Okay. And I can attest that that's pretty much globally. Um, it's seems that it's easier for people with a lower budget to buy these cereals and what we would say is more overly processed foods. If I were going in the store as a mom right now and I wanted to buy a cereal for my children, which cereal should I choose?
Oatmeal. And you can prepare it the night before and then eat it the next day as overnight oats. And that's going to increase the resistant starch because we know oats also have resistant starch. So you're getting an extra dose of fiber. You can throw in some fruit, some nuts, some yogurt. Just make it a really healthy, fulfilling type of breakfast. Otherwise, I would go with maybe a shredded wheat or something that at least has some protein and some fiber. So really reading those labels and, low sugar, I would avoid any that have those added sugars, which they're all going to, but choose the lowest.
Yeah. I mean, you can get oatmeal without sugar, though. You can just get plain oats and then,
You can't, and that's probably cheaper than any other ready to eat cereal that's out there.
yeah. Because I mean, I'm not eating as much oatmeal anymore, but also, my fiance, he adds protein powder to his oats.
Mhm.
He mixes in some protein powder, some peanut butter. I love peanut butter a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super. Peanut butter is healthy, but like, as long as you're not having too much of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Everything in moderation.
Yeah. Everything in moderation. So, what do you see the future of the prebiotic and probiotic industry to look like?
First, I think we need to do more studies on how the diet is impacting the gut microbes. So that's kind of first. What are people eating? Let's start there. And then I would like to see probably more tailored. We're in the US are going toward a more personalized nutrition model. And of course, that's going to be a bit challenging. So individualized, we've got personalized, so we can look at a population or individualized type of nutrition recommendations where we're looking at the microbiome, we're looking at sleep, exercise, the environment, diet, all of these things, genetics that are going to impact our overall health. I would like to see how we can use probiotics and prebiotics for certain populations or even disease conditions. I would like to see more of that. That's starting to come out. I know there is a probiotic that is for people who have respiratory disorders. And so we are seeing those tailored type of supplements for people with certain chronic diseases, but I would like to see a little bit more. And I would really like for the price of people to get their gut microbiome sequence to go down. So it could be a little bit more like it's part of your medical record. Like this is what your gut microbes look like right now. And then what can we do to change it to look like this? And we don't know if this is, going to be perfect for you, but let's change it along the way so we can find the optimal bacteria composition for you that fits into your lifestyle.
How much does it cost right now?
Um, I don't really know because I'm not sure I trust some of these companies that are kind of pop-up startups that are charging like $199, $300. Some may be okay, I don't know. But I use in my research a pretty solid company. And of course, I get the research pricing, so it's still expensive. It's, you know, upwards $200 a sample.
Yeah, I think in learning about how important the gut microbiome is, I think that during your yearly physical, that that should be something that's tested, because it's saying so much about what's going on with you. And then to your point about making it personalized, everyone's microbiome looks different. You can be eating the same food, grow up in the same area, siblings, but your microbiome itself is unique to you. So it would be cool if we could have these personalized, or I wouldn't say personalized to be precisely for that person, because I think that we're not there yet, but I think that we could build a probiotic that could help sections of the populations, because I'm sure that you find a lot of similarities in some microbiomes. They're not all completely different.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that would be a
Yeah,
great.
I agree.
Yeah. I have a very okay, I'm gonna sit back. I have a very interesting thoughts about how the environment that we're in right now is impacting our microbiome. And the reason that is, it's because we have a lot of stress. Like I don't watch the news because I'm just like, it's all the same, and I get super stressed out, and I'm like, okay, this is what is going to happen to me. Okay. In this very stressed out world right now, how are you, as a dietitian and a microbiome expert, using your knowledge to create the best microbiome for yourself?
I make sure I eat plenty of fruits and vegetables. I'm kind of saying the same thing
Yeah.
over and over again, but I mean, it is what it is. And I also eat a lot of healthy fats. So I only have extra virgin olive oil in my house. I eat avocados, and I make sure I get enough low fat dairy, and especially the dairy that's now higher in protein. You can get Greek yogurt that tastes amazing, that's really rich in protein for relatively low caloric amount. And so I think, I try and eat that with some nuts every day, and also, you know, lean meats and fish. I eat fish probably at least once a day, probably overload, and then exercise. I get up every morning and I go run, or I lift weights, or just do something outside, walk. And, I think just getting outside, even though I live in Houston, probably one of the most polluted places in the United States.
It's
And,
hot there.
and it's hot there. Yeah, here. Yes. But yeah, just trying to get enough sleep, eating a lot of I eat a salad, try to at least once a day, a big salad with lots of protein and healthy fats. Yeah.
And then one of the last questions I normally ask is, who is your science genie?
There is a lady, I think she's PhD, she might be MD, but her name is Gabrielle Lyons, Lyons. And she talks a lot about, she focuses on women, but specifically how we should exercise, diet, how to optimize our body composition using exercise and diet. And I think she is a PhD because she's done a lot of research. So, yeah, she's my science genie, Gabrielle Lyons.
That's lovely. I want to say thank you so much for coming to speak with us today and talking to us about all of your expertise in probiotics and fibers. And would you like to let everybody know where to continue to follow you and find your prebiotic?
Sure. So you can find my prebiotic at Renutrin, RENUTRIN.co. That's CO. So renutrin.co. And then you can also follow me on LinkedIn at Dr. Mindy Patterson. And I'm also on YouTube.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Dr. Mindy.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
If there's one thing you could take away from this episode, is your gut microbes are super picky eaters. And when you feed them well, they return the favor. We learned that fiber helps balance our blood sugar, reduces cravings, and lowers our insulin. However, there's one more thing I want you to take away from this episode, and that's stress. Stress will kill every single progress that you have on eating well and exercise. So stress management should be at the top of your list. Dr. Mindy's advice boiled down to two powerful, simple things, and that was start small and stay consistent. To learn more about what Dr. Mindy is trying to do with her prebiotics and probiotics, you can check out her website, Renutrin, and follow her on social media, on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I will leave the link to her information in the bio. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to Science Genies. Like, share, comment, especially comment, because scientists love questions. Stay curious and